All right, we're back. It is COMP123, summer 2016 semester, and it's week 2, part 2 of our broadcast. We just talked about reference type parameters, and now I want to talk about some other types. Now let's take a look at what we got here. So this is the reference type, this slide here. If I want to talk about the other one, which is output parameters, out. Again, I want you, I'm not going to demonstrate this one as much. I want you to think about it as, I want the parameter when I return something, instead of having a return statement in my code, I want to have the parameter change. Okay, so I don't need a return statement at all. In fact, if anything, I want you to think of it this way: if I have a ref keyword, the ref keyword, right? What I'm actually doing is I don't need to return anything. And one of the problems that people will have is, you can only return one thing, one object or one variable from a method. You can only return one thing. You can't return multiple things. You can't return a list of things, only one thing, right? So to get around that, they use reference type parameters so that I don't have to return anything, right? I can just all the reference parameters are output. It's the same thing for out parameters, out type. They're a little different, right? Because look what it says here. Here's a reference where it says the value of the memory address is the same as the reference parameter. And notice we have to use the ref keyword, just a review, ref keyword both in the calling, when we call the method, as well as when we define the method, right? The ref keyword has to be used in both places, right? Okay, cool. And then when it comes to an out parameter, right, here's our input method, out. And we have first and second. We have to, when we call the method, we have to do that. And as well as when we declare the method, right? So out 1 and 2. Now this 1 and 2 don't refer, they don't refer to anything else, but they actually refer now to first and second. It's like a reference parameter, okay? But actually it gets returned a little differently, right? And they're almost identical, just letting you know. The one thing that happens is, well, for both case 1 and 2, why would I use a reference parameter over an out parameter? And here's the difference, the advantage. I'm not going to go, that's why I'm not going to demo it, because it looks exactly the same. Okay, for you guys, for your use, the output is going to be identical. Ref and out, you're not going to see what the difference is yet. But let's talk about the advantage of using them. So a method can change multiple values. That's a good reason, right? A disadvantage is that they allow multiple methods to have access to the same data, weakening the whole, like I said before, when it comes to object-oriented programming, the whole black box. You don't know, who remember what the black box paradigm is? Anyone remember that? Last semester, right? Okay. You know what it is? Yeah, okay. But here's the real way to think about it. Okay, I'm driving a car. Do I know how the engine works? Most of us don't, right? So I know I can get into the car. Here's my function. I get into the car, right? I sit behind the steering wheel. I press the accelerator. My car goes. I steer. My car turns. If I press the brake, it stops. That's all I know. I don't know if there's oil, how it works, lubrication, gears, the ratio between my, my gear system and road and my tires. I don't know any of that stuff. When I get into the car, it's a black box for me the way it works. I just know that it drives. That's what the black box paradigm is, right? Here, it's like this. I'm saying, instead of using the steering wheel to steer, right? I'm not using the steering wheel. I'm actually pulling at the whole, transmission and doing different things inside the engine. Imagine if I can reach into the engine, like I can phase through like a superhero, right? And somehow through my dashboard, and then bring my hand back out, and I can control the whole car without touching the steering wheel. That's what I'm doing when I use ref and out. We don't want to do that. I'm not a superhero, right? So we break the black box paradigm that way. Okay. Let's talk about these two methods here. This is actually good for testing as well. When we did last semester, we did the parse methods. So that's why it says chapter 2 from the book, right? So we do something like this. When I convert and parse a method, if I say, take my score, and I want to parse what I read from the console to make it an integer, and then assign it to my score. That's what the int.parse does, right? I can also convert from an integer to an integer 32, right? So I take my stuff from my console, convert it to a larger integer, or an integer 32 type, and then store it inside my integer. So this is what the convert and parse do. Typically, we use either one of these methods is fine. They do the same, very, very similar to the same thing, right? What does the other thing do, this try parse? Well, this is where the out parameter comes into play, okay? This is where you need the out, because this is the way this method has been designed. It's designed that it needs an out type parameter, so it doesn't return anything, right? But it changes the value. Let's get a more of an example. So we have an integer, which is a score here, right? And then I have an out type parameter, which is a reference type. I'm passing in the score, and this is a built-in function, try parse, right? It's a built-in function. I'm not writing it. You're not writing it. But when we pass in the score, I don't actually have to say score is equal to int.tryparse. I don't do that. I say int.tryparse, take my string, and pass in an out type parameter, which is score, and it'll be stored inside my score. That's what out does. And that's the advantage of using out when you don't have control. Like for us right now, ref and out, same thing. But if you're creating something where you don't want somebody else to have access to your particular method, it's stored inside of a namespace somewhere, right? You want to do something like this without some kind of assignment statement. This is equal to that. Without that, I can do the same thing, because what I'm doing is I'm using, instead of saying score is equal to int.tryparse, which is what we did normally with the return statement, this method doesn't have a return statement at all. It stores everything in the out parameter. Okay, that's what it does. And again, that's why I'm telling you, I'm pushing it back some other kinds of examples. This is the one time that I think it's really nice. Output parameters are really neat in certain cases. Do I want to use them from an object-oriented perspective? Absolutely not. So I want you to know about them, but we're not going to use them a lot in this course. In fact, none of your assignments or tests are going to make sure, you know, that I'm going to talk about, let's use in a, I want to make you use in a practical test the out or the ref. But if I test you in a quiz, you should know what they are. They're reference type parameters. They point to the address of the location as opposed to passing things by value. You don't pass things by value. Questions around that, right? It's a good, really good example to look at. I'm not going to make it only from a time perspective. We're going to run out of time if I do that because I have a bunch of other stuff to cover for this day and next day, right? But this is a great example because it uses a new method that's built in, tryparse, which is built into the C#, the C# library. And it actually uses the an out type parameter. It's required as one of the parameter types. Okay. Same thing with parameter arrays. I mean, we saw a great example of a parameter array right here, right in my program driver class. This is a parameter array right here. Except it doesn't say params, it says args. Argument array or parameter array. Actually, even in JavaScript, we also have an argument type or parameter type array that's automatic, that's generated with every function that we do in JavaScript. But I want you to notice that that's what it is. You get an array of these arguments, and it could be anything that goes in there. Okay, let's take a look at what the specifics are here. So it's a local array only for the method. That's what it is. So it doesn't exist outside of the method, right? And it's created dynamically by me passing in several arguments. So instead of passing in fixed parameters, parameter 1, parameter 2, parameter 3, and that's what my method signature is listening for, I'm passing in any number of parameters, and the argument array is going to grow depending on how many parameters I pass in. Why would you want that, right? Because part of it is to keep flexible, and we'll talk about that. So here's an example of that, where I have, you know, a string of names. Here's my string array of names, right? And I have Mark, Paulette, Carol, and James, right? Those are the names. And remember that from an array perspective, what do these curly braces do? They actually initialize the names array. That's what they do, right? So string array names, this is one way of initializing them, the string array with data, right? There's other ways too. This is one of them. Okay, so here's display strings Ginger, display strings George, right? Display strings is a method that takes whatever the array is, right? An array of people. Here's params, right? And here's a string array of people, and I could pass in a number of these strings, one or more. Doesn't have to be just one. And then depending on which one I pass in, I'm going to output, right, the string that's related to the person. Now I'm using a for each statement here, and this is really bad. Please, whenever you use for each statements, for loops, all that kind of stuff, I want you to use curly braces all the time. I never want you to do this. Why? This is bad form. If you see this, where you have for each and a console.write right underneath it, yes, it can work. But like I said before, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And this is bad form. I would never recommend you do this. I would recommend putting a curly brace here at the beginning and the end, because if I want to add additional statements to my for each loop, I could be confused and I could think about getting certain results, and it could cause a systemic bug that I can't detect. Because I'm like, it should work, it's right there, it's inside my code block, but there isn't any code block. The code block doesn't exist. The code is just from the for each all the way to the semicolon. It doesn't include anything else. And if you added something else, it would ignore that, or it would make some other weird result. Okay, so that's why we always use curly braces after a kind of loop structure. So this, what it does is it says, hey, take the person array. And for every person and people, here's the people array, right? For every person and people, write to the console. Now, here's a question for you. Do I really need this array? The names array. Do I need the names array? Anybody? For any reason? No. Except here. Right? I don't use it here or here, right? I don't use it, but here I do pass an array. And when I'm passing in an array, what kind of a parameter is an array? By default, what kind of a parameter is it? Come on, people, you should know this. It's a reference type. So whenever I pass an array, an object, a method, or something else into another function or a method, it automatically, or class, it's automatically a reference type, which means I'm not passing the values of my array. I'm not making a copy of my array here, right? I'm making it's passing by reference. So that means when I pass this through, when I go names, just the names array itself, it's actually, this string is actually, I'm referring to the names array here. It's very dangerous. Be careful when you do that. Okay, let's take a look at that. Let me take a look at this and see what happens. So I want to do something similar with my names, right? But I want to do this. Here's the method that I want to write within the next, I got like 10 minutes, let's say. I want to make a method, 10 minutes. Here, oh, here's the test. Here's your little challenge, okay? I want to write a method that keeps on, taking stuff in from the console. Let's say I read the console, I'll make it fixed 5 times, right? I'll read the console 5 times for different strings, names, whatever you want to put in there, right? And whatever I put in, if I put 1 or more names in there, see if I can make this more interesting. If the string that I read in from the console is end, lowercase end, it stops reading. Otherwise, it will keep reading forever. Do I know how to do that? How do I make a method to do that? So I keep reading from the console until I get the word end. Let's write that method first, okay? Let's try that out. All right, so let's do this thing. So here's I want to write a method that I keep getting console input until I get the string name, the string end. So we're going to make this a public static, and it's going to return a string, right? Hey, is it going to return a string, or is it going to return a string array? Yeah, string array, right? Remember this, the square brackets mean array. So it's going to return a string array, and we're going to say, we're going to call this method read until end. Right? Read until the end, until we get an end thing, right? And what we're going to do with it, we're not going to pass anything into it. There's no parameters we're going to pass in. Right? What we're going to do is this read until end is going to return a string array, and we have to declare a local string array for it to do that. Let's try this out. So I'm going to say something like this. By the way, this really doesn't take care of params array, but I want to talk about arrays today, so this is going to satisfy my requirements, right? So it's really not related to the topic at hand, but bear with me. So I need to create a string array first. I'm going to say string array, a local string array that I'm going to take in, and we're going to call these things inputs. Can I use the name inputs? Is that a reserved word? No, I can use it. So here's inputs. So string array of inputs. Now if I do this, right, string array of inputs, that's cool. And what I want to do just to help me out is I want to return my inputs, right? What am I returning? String array. Now it satisfies the requirement of this piece right here, right? If I do this. Now notice it says use of assigned local variable inputs is what I'm looking. Here's my local variable. Here's what I'm returning. I'm returning a string array of inputs, string array, but the array is empty, right? How come I'm getting an error here? Anybody? Come on, come on, come on. You gotta tell me these things, man. Okay, but if I was to initialize it, I'd have to initialize it here, and I'm going to initialize it with inputs, right? Like some kind of read line, right? So example would be if I say, you know, 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3. If I were to do that, you're saying this would satisfy my requirements, right? So if I put one of those in there, we're good, and it does, right? But what if I don't have any inputs into my string array, right? How do I initialize my array otherwise? That's why it's giving me an error. It's going to be an empty array, right? Coming back out. Well, I could do something like this. I could cause a loop statement to happen, right? Now, what kind of loop am I saying? I'm saying it can't be a for loop, because I don't know how many times I'm going to loop, right? Probably a while loop is good, or some kind of until, right? Can I use an until? Is there an until in C#? Why would I use a do while here instead of a while, right? I always want at least one input. That's why, right? While may or may not function, may or may not work, right? A do while always works once, at least, right? So I'm going to do, here's where we're going to get the input, right? My input, right? My input, and it's going to be a number, whatever the number is. I'm going to fix this in a second, is equal to, right, console.readline. Right, I'm going to do my console.readline. Okay, now how come it's giving me an error? It says reads the next line of the characters and put it in my inputs. It's in my string, right? Well, how come I can't do this? Well, because what reference, what index, which is missing here is in my array is some kind of index, right? Well, I need to have some kind of index counter. So I'm just going to call this, we're going to call this input counter, right? So we're going to call it an integer. We're going to call it input counter. Right, and we're going to assign it to 0 starting off. And then in here, we're going to put our input counter, right? Input counter. And this is where people go crazy, right? So inputs, input counter, and it says use of unassigned local variable inputs. Okay, I'm assigning it, right? Input counter, input 0. I'm assigning it right here, right? I'm getting input from my console. How come this is not happening? Because inputs has to be initialized, right? And I can't initialize inputs like this, right? Because I don't have anything in there. I mean, I could initialize it. I could say inputs is equal to something, but how do I initialize arrays? Is there a way of doing it right away? Do I have to use the new keyword? Can I do that? Like, so do I do something like this? You know, it's a string array. Do I have to do something like input is equal to a new string array, you know, a new array, like one of those. Can I use the array keyword of string type? Can I do that? Do I have to do this? Is that possible in C#? By the way, it works in JavaScript and in Java, right? But how do I initialize my inputs array, right? At the beginning, anyone remember how? Google it, guys. Come on, we only have 10 minutes, and won't be able to do this example. Anybody? How do I initialize a string array in C#? Look that up. Come on. I want some of you to work. I declared it here, string array of inputs. Right? I try to do it here, right? I try to do it in here, right? So I tried to use a new keyword to use the array. That didn't work. Right? A non-generic array cannot be used with type arguments. right? It says generate class array, generate class array, generate nested array, generate the new type. Yep. Yeah. Well, here's our input counter is 0. I'm assigning it to my console.read line because that's where I'm getting my console.read line. So I should be able to do this. Why is this having a problem? It's returning this returns a string, right? I'm listening for a string here because it's a string array. So how come this isn't working? What if I made this instead of input counter, I made it 0? Would that solve my problem? So let's just get rid of this for a second. Here's my input counter, right? And if I do this, I still get input 0. It doesn't make any sense, right? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, somehow it doesn't work. How come? How about if I did this? How about if I did this first? Would this help? If I input 0 is equal to this. How come this isn't working either? Right? Input 0 is equal to, I'm initializing with nothing. How come it's not working? Yes. Something's missing. Come on, guys. Yes. My curly brackets where? This? Like this? Yeah, but that means, remember, an array, what's the problem with an array? I haven't told it how big it is, right? How big, remember, an array is it's a fixed size, right? I can't just do a string array. How big is the size of the array, right? How do I know how big this thing is? Can I do it even? Can I even do this thing? Can I make it so that it's an unassigned array of strings? And I'm not telling it how big it is. I'm just saying I just want an array of strings. Yes. For loop, up here first to initialize it? How big should it be? What if I want 100 inputs? What if I want 1,000 inputs? What if I want 10,000 inputs? Should I make it how do I know? No, I know, but I mean, how do I do it? If I have to do a for loop, so I'll do a for loop, right? Here's my for loop, and inside my for loop, dot length, okay, but even if I do a dot length, if I say an inputs dot length, what's my inputs dot length right now? 0, right? Because it's a string array of inputs. Come on, guys, I'm tricking you. What is this thing that I'm trying to do? I haven't initialized the thing at all, right? Come on, you guys are bad Googlers, right? Here's my Google foo. My Google foo is strong, right? Okay, let's see if I'm right. So I want to say, string array in C#. Let's do one of those. What do I get? If this is because you have to do this by some point in the future, right? So here's my string array. I'm just going to choose 1, right? Right. And here's where I have I create an array, and this is the first way. Look, new string. I told you there's something missing, right? Here's new string, right? Here's new string 3. Can I do a new string with nothing? Remember, I told you a string is an object, right? A string is not something else. So this is from 4.6. So if we were to go back to this, and I told you I'm missing something, it would have to be like this. String inputs is equal to a new string array. Is this enough? Can I do this? What about if I do this? If I say it's a string of 50. Can I do that? Yes. But that means it's only 50. I can only have 50 inputs. I can't do it any other way. I have to specify. When I use the new keyword, I have to specify the length of my array. Why? Why are arrays different than lists? An array is a fixed, never changing object. It's always going to be the same size no matter what happens, right? Okay, it's not a parameter array. A parameter array is a special type of array. This array is not like that, right? So if I say 50, 50 inputs, right? This is what this thing does. It allows me up to 50 different inputs. So that 50 times I can enter something in, right? For now, if you want to make it really big, you can make it 100, something crazy that's unreasonable. 100 inputs. It'll take about 100, right? Now we're going to find a solution for this next week. I'll show you or next day that goes around this. Okay. Okay. Now I don't need this anymore. So now this works, right? And instead of doing this, what I wanted to say was this is equal to console.log, console.writeLine or readLine, console.readLine. Here's my readLine. Right, so that's what I wanted to do. I want to get the stuff from my console.readLine, and I want to increment. I want to use my input counter here, input counter, right? And I want to say this. Here's my if statement, right? If is my algorithm, right? If input counter, right? This is where it begins to become complex, is equal to n, lowercase, right? Then what do I want to do? I want to break out of this array. My condition is false, right? So input counter is equal to -1. Else, every other time, if it's not equal to end, input counter ++. And down here, I'm going to make my condition, in this particular case, I'm going to say is input counter, right? When my input counter is not equal to -1. Now, this is an algorithm. It's a little bit more difficult, and I'm going to lose some of you with this one, because you're going to go, oh my God, I don't understand what this is. Why is this happening, right? And you guys are all going to freak out about this thing. Does it even work, right? This thing that I bought and how do I prove that this works, right? While I enter this stuff in. Well, because I have to, it returns the inputs, right? So when I call this thing here, I'm going to call it this read until end, right? I'm going to call it from something, which I'm going to call it from my main read until end, and I want to output. I'm going to output my string. What if I output my string now? If I say something like this, you know, console.writeLine. Let's add a little space in here. Console.writeLine. And then do another one. Console, so just for spacing. .writeLine. And then I say something like this. Read until end, right? So read until end, right? Keep reading until the end. So I'm taking whatever the value that I'm getting, which is the result, this inputs array, and I'm pumping it out to the console. What am I going to get on the console if I output an array type? Well, let's see what happens. So Control F5. Here's my console. Right, and it's listening for me to write things in. I could probably improve my method by asking to enter another one, enter a new value, right? But let's just add a couple of them. I'll say Tom, Mark, Garrett, Rich, Ross, I don't know, Mary. There's a girl, right? And then lowercase n, and press enter. And I get this, a system.string back. That's what I get back because my string value, right, it's an actual object. I'm getting a system.string back. This is good. This is actually good what I'm expecting, right? So notice that my method worked. When I put the word end in there, it was listening for that. It has to be exactly end. It's going to be equal to end. It stops my counter. Okay, now this is something that you haven't seen before, chances are. Right? Because it's new. I just wrote it out of my top of my head, my pointy head, right? Which means there's nothing you can do to study for this thing, right? It's either you know it or you don't, right? Now here's something I want to do. So when I enter something in, if I get my console read inside my do loop, right? I want to kind of do something like this. Console.writeLine. We're going to finish this next day. Console.writeLine. And in my console.writeLine, if I can type it properly, enter another one and enter a value. Just going to keep on enter a value. Enter a value. We're going to say something like this, right? End to stop. Type in brackets. How do I type a bracket inside the value? I got to use an escape character, right? So is it backslash or forward slash? Is it this one or is it this one for my escape character? Huh? That one? So backslash, if that's true, right? I want to type in there, I'm going to say something like enter a value, and we'll say something like end to stop. Okay. But look how I'm getting these errors, right? Doesn't understand what those things are. See if I do that. It's not going to be right, but Let's see what it prints out. Let's just save this thing. Let's see what this does for us, right? And I'm going to press Control F5, and it doesn't give me what I want, right? And to stop, but I want to get rid of these slashes, right? How about this? Do I need to get rid of the slashes? I can just do one of these. Because they're in quotation marks, I don't need escape characters for brackets, right? I can do one of these, and that'll be fine. Okay, so end to stop. This is what's going to keep on adding the value, right? And it's going to say, please continue to enter, continue to add stuff until I stop. So I'm going to do that one more time. Control F5. Control F5. I'll be okay. Let's try this out. So it's going to say Tom, Mark, John, Mary, Sue, right, and then end. Right, stops. It keeps on asking me until I type the word end, right? Okay, so this is a way of getting input from the thing, and it's going to store it where? It's going to store it in a string or string array. Up to 100 different names can be stored in here. Fixed number, right? That's one thing. And the other thing that I have a problem with is it returns inputs. I got to find a way of printing that out. Well, guess what I need? I need another method to print. I need one method. One method is going to be the thing that reads, and the other method is going to be the thing that writes out. Okay, so I'm going to put this up on GitHub the way it is. I'm going to say something like, and by the way, this is 0.05 added, and the method's called, this method, read until end. I'm not finished it. I'm in the middle, but I was going to get up and go to the washroom, and if I was doing GitHub properly, added read until end, and I'll put a thing not completed. Because I'm not ready. I haven't done my comments for it. I haven't finished it off. I haven't done the proper test for it. I haven't done a lot of things with it. I haven't refactored it. I'm not really done yet. And I'm in the middle of my thing, and I'm still recording, and I'm late by 5 minutes, right? So I got to go. So how do I do that? So I go back to Team Explorer, and I go home, and I go changes, and I put that in there. I put added, not completed in there. So I go back to Team Explorer. Commit all, home, and then sync, and then push. Now, guys and girls, you should have it up online. Next day we get together, we'll do a brief test, 5 to 7 questions on the stuff that I've already talked about today and last week. Okay, anything it's all game, fair game, right? And then we'll get right into this piece again to finish off this lesson this week. Okay, any questions before we depart? Cool. See you next day on Friday.